when I look at 50s, I think of immune system, I think of gastrointestinal health, and I think of heart and cognitive health.
Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics podcast. Today we are talking with Dr. Ian Smith. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be with you guys.
Well, I heard about your book, Eat Your Age, and I thought that was such an interesting title. It really catches, like, okay, that makes sense. Like, we want answers to questions, Eat Your Age. So, we're going to talk about that, obviously, in the midlife realm, women 50 plus. But the book is called Eat Your Age, Feel Younger, Be Happier, Live Longer. Why did you decide to write this book?
Well, I wanted to write this book several years ago, and my editor at the time didn't think it was enough to put in a single book. And so we had an editorial disagreement. It didn't get published. I changed houses, not because of that, but I changed houses, had a new editor, and she loved the concept. And so I've always wanted to write this book. And the reason why I wrote it was because so many people who were in their 40s and 50s and 60s plus would ask me, why is it that I can't eat the same foods as I did in my 20s and 30s, or my body's responding differently to these foods? Why can't I move the same way I did in my 20s and 30s? And what I realized was that people weren't making adaptations. Our bodies change physically and physiologically every decade. That's part of aging. And people think or have thought that the things that they were doing in their 20s and 30s, they can just keep doing forever. And it just doesn't work that way. And so I wanted to write a book that broke down per decade, starting in your 30s. What are your top power nutrients for your decade? What are the best and safest exercises? What medical screening tests do you need for your decade? What are the medical conditions that are lurking around the corner? And then at the end of each decade, I give a 30-day customized meal plan that will incorporate all of those power nutrients that are most relevant for your decade of life. And so this is arguably my most comprehensive health book, because I just don't talk about nutrients, even though the title is Eat Your Age. I talk about exercise too. What are the best exercises for your decade? What do they do? And then I have QR codes in the book that people can hit with their phones to get demonstrations of these exercises. Some exercises you're doing in your 30s, you don't need to be doing in your 50s and 60s and 70s, but you still need to exercise. So what are those exercises and how should you do it?
Yeah, that's what I really liked so much about your book, is that you broke down through decades. And Colleen and I, like she said, our podcast usually has listeners in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. And what really hit me is when you get in the 40s and the 50s in your book, you talk about this is the time when things are creeping up on you. Can you share some of those things that are creeping up on us and why 50s is so important?
Yeah, 50s, well, let's start in our 40s, okay? 40s are a real time of hormonal changes and energy changes. Changes in your energy demands versus changes in your energy supply, what you're actually able to do. Life is busy, family's busy, career is taking hold for most people. So it's really a very tumultuous time in our lives. And what people have to be mindful of is that the behaviors that they participated in their 20s and 30s are now starting to manifest, in your 40s, particularly your mid 40s, mid to late 40s. And so people need to be mindful of the need to increase their energy levels with things like antioxidants, to be careful of things like heart disease, early signs of heart disease. So MUFAs, monounsaturated fatty acids, extra virgin olive oil, avocados, examples. These are things you need to be mindful of. So in your 40s, I think it's the time to start saying, okay, I'm not exactly the youngest kid on the block anymore. I'm also not the oldest kid either, but I'm in a transition phase. What can I do now to set myself up so that in my 50s and 60s plus, I'm not having early heart disease, strokes, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure. So that's why I look at the 40s, okay? Then you get into the 50s, which is my decade, by the way. And I'm very mindful of how I feel, okay? I'm 55, and I'm not kidding you. I feel like I'm 25. I have the same energy level. I can lift more weight than I did when I was 25. I really don't have much change. Yes, sometimes in the morning, I will feel a little ache here and there, but in general, I feel as active. Why is that? I ask myself. Well, I think the biggest thing is one, I exercise a lot. People underestimate the importance of exercise in your middle ages. They underestimate it. And we'll get into that in a little bit, particularly in the 60s plus, and what type of exercises. But the other thing is, I think about what I call my food vices. Okay. I don't drink alcohol. I don't eat much red meat anymore. I don't eat a lot of fried food. I don't eat a lot of processed foods. I do like sweets, so I do have my snacks. I bake and stuff like that, but I don't overindulge. My good friend Rachel Ray, when I was always on the show, she would always say to me, Dr. Ian, everything in moderation. And yeah, almost everything in moderation. It's the 70-30 rule. 70% reasonably healthy, 30% have some fun. So that's been my personal guide in how I've lived. And I think that people in their 50s in particular need to be very mindful of how they fuel their bodies. Food is medicine. And I think that people have a mindset where they resign themselves to disease. They resign themselves to loss of function. They resign themselves to a withdrawal from society. And that's not how the way it should be. I think just the opposite. I'm trying to get people to change their perspective and realize that aging is opportunity, not loss.
I love that.
I do
You
too.
you just gave so much information in that one question, Bridget. So good question, Bridget.
Sorry.
No, that was
it's great.
wonderful.
It's a great
Because
answer.
I think that we need to, explore that a little bit. So in your 50s, what foods, not necessarily should you avoid, but should you kind of join and say, I need to take this on a daily basis?
Yeah. So in Eat Your Age, what I do is I give you 10 of the power nutrients per decade. And by the way, just for the record, some of the nutrients appear in several decades. Things like calcium. You always need good calcium, antioxidants, always good. But, when I think about the 50s, I think about two major things. I think about gastrointestinal health first, okay? GI health. As we age, our gastrointestinal system slows down. What does that mean? One of the big reasons, or one of the ways our gastrointestinal system works, is regularity. That is, you're able to digest food, move waste out of your system. That's how the body has to work to keep the body functioning well and don't have a buildup of byproducts or toxins. As we age, the gastrointestinal system's ability to move, our gut is like a worm, by the way, a hollow worm, and it's twisting and moving to move things and to absorb. So you have the food in the gut, you absorb the nutrients into the lining of the gut, and then you twist and move the waste out. As we age, that twisting process, that movement slows down, which means it's more difficult to process, to digest, which is also why as you get older, you should consume, and there are other reasons for this, but you should definitely start consuming less red meat. Red meat is very difficult for the gut to process. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time. And think about it. If your gut is getting older and it's not doing its job like it used to in your 20s and early 30s, and now you have this big bolus of red meat sitting in there, your gut is in agony, right? Trying to figure out how can I get through this? It will get through it, but my goodness, it's sweating, it's exhausted, it's saying no more, So we talk about gut health, we talk about fiber. Fiber. The vast majority of Americans are not consuming enough fiber. The average person needs about 20 to 35 grams of fiber on a daily basis. And most people are getting probably about 15 grams of fiber. And what fiber does is it keeps you regular. It helps your gut. And that's very, very important. So when I talk about 50s, I talk about gut health, I talk about fiber. I also talk about heart disease and heart health and blood vessel health. And so I think about omega-3s. Omega-3 fatty acids are wonderful. They are delicious, beautiful, nutrient-dense things that we need to eat more of. Now, why omega-3s? Heart health and brain health. Okay. Extremely, extremely important. I talk about vitamin C. Vitamin C is critical because of your immune system. As we get older, our immune system gets tired. It just does. And the things that our body could fight off in our 20s and 30s, it can still fight off, but not as well. And so, what can you do to boost your immune system? That's vitamin C, peppers, tomatoes, all very important. And so, when I look at 50s, I think of immune system, I think of gastrointestinal health, and I think of heart and cognitive health.
Yeah, and I love that you put in the book, you have it divided into decades, but then in the back, you also have a 30-day meal plan. But you're very fair in saying, hey, this isn't a diet. This isn't this isn't something that, yeah, you're probably going to look better after you do it, but it's for your health that you do it. It's for your longevity. I do love that it is in there like that. And I was curious if you could just share some of the things around the 40s, 50s, 60s. You don't have to do it all, but really the most important foods in there that that are there for those decades.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm known for writing diet books. Okay, I've written many of them. But this isn't a diet book. I'm glad that you mentioned that. This is really a book about how do you eat better for better health, for longevity, for happiness, for better quality of life, right? However, in my Facebook group, which I have where there are thousands of people doing this together, and I welcome listeners and or viewers to join. It's called Eat Your Age, which is the title of the book. In the Facebook group, people are now finishing the first 4 weeks of the plan, and they're reporting weight loss, which is such a beautiful added bonus. That wasn't my intent to do that. But what it says to me is that so many people are not making the best nutritional choices. And by just changing their nutritional choices, they are allowing their bodies now to shed excess weight. And that to me is just a wonderful and beautiful thing. In our 40s, for example, I talk a lot about the need for vitamin D. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is important because it helps the bones absorb calcium and phosphorus, and it helps the body to retain calcium and phosphorus. And you need that for dense bones, particularly for women. 30s and 40s for women, I got to tell you, are critical for bone density because how you treat your bones in your 30s and 40s becomes an issue in your 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so vitamin D to me is really critical. Now, there are a lot of vitamin D fortified foods that people can actually eat. Cereals or vitamin D. Whenever you see the word fortified, by the way, it means added. They added it to that particular food. So vitamin D fortified juices, milks, cereals, all those things. But also in chapter 3, what I try to do, because my whole goal of this book is to make this as user friendly as possible, I give you a list of vitamin D foods, whether it's things like dairy, fish, some mushrooms that have been in the sun for a long time can have a lot of vitamin D. And so I think that people need to look and see what are these vitamin D containing foods and how they build a lot of it in their 40s. I also, in the 40s, like to talk about magnesium. And magnesium is important for everything from helping with hot flashes to helping with blood pressure. And believe it or not, a lot of people start seeing an increase in their blood pressure in their 40s. Now, it typically peaks 50s and 60s, but in your 40s, people start seeing those numbers come up. So we talk about magnesium-rich foods, and people are surprised that they're probably getting magnesium, don't realize it. Broccoli, bananas, black beans, edamame, oatmeal, peanuts, yogurt, salmon, soy milk. So those are the things that I think about for people in their 40s. When I talk about 50s, I talk about the fiber, right? So we talked about things like flax seeds, raspberries, popcorn, by the way, has a lot of fiber in it. You don't need all that butter and salt, but air popcorn is great. Also, I want to mention chia seeds. Chia seeds, if someone said to me, what is one food that has the most amazing nutritional value? It's chia seeds. Fiber, protein, omega-3s, low in calories, versatile. You can add it to puddings, smoothies, yogurts, salads. It's just, chia seeds are nature's wonder. I'm telling you.
Okay, so the listeners need to go buy a bag of chia seeds right
Yes, I have it in
now.
a container downstairs. I just need to
I know.
sprinkle it smart.
I
Yes.
put them in my
Yeah.
overnight oats every morning. I
Right.
like to, and I think it's making things in advance is really helpful as we get older because we have, I mean, for anybody really, but we're so busy that we don't have time necessarily to say, okay, let me make this. But if it's already done, it's easy.
Can I tell you something about overnight oats? For the longest, I thought the concept was not very appetizing because I like oatmeal. I like it cooked. I like it warm. I'm from the Northeast. And then I was writing the recipe. So I wrote a recipe book for Eat Your Age. It's called the Eat Your Age Official Recipe Book because so many people, when they get my books, they're like, can you give us more recipes? So I wrote this little simple book. It's a paperback book, 150 recipes. All the recipes are in my, what I call my TASH system. Tasty, affordable, simple, healthy. So it's 30 minutes or less, few ingredients, and about less than $4 per serving of the recipe. So I was said, let me do an overnight oats. Let me try this thing. And oh my goodness, can I tell you, I felt like, first of all, I was pissed at myself. How could I go all these years without eating overnight oats, right? Like, what was I thinking? But then I'm like, oh my goodness, it's so good. It's so yummy. It's so convenient and it's versatile. I put pomegranate seeds, chia seeds, bananas, sliced bananas, strawberries, blueberries. You can do whatever you want. And you put it into by the way, and you can make it thick. I like mine on the thicker side. So that means less milk. I used almond milk, which is great. But you can make this morning breakfast and it's delicious, it's filling, and it is packed with nutrition. Packed.
Right. I love it. I always, there's a place in Florida that has them and I always get them there. And I'm like, boy, if you are constipated, that really helps out.
So we're talking about flushing the system out
It
again.
does, but it's good for you. But it also does. If you are constipated, hey, yeah.
You know what? We all have our issues. So why
Yep.
not?
Yeah.
If
you see me in
to
Florida,
help.
you know what I've been up to.
And we also,
I'm going to tell you something. I don't really talk about this very publicly. So I had a bout with constipation. Okay. And I've always heard about it, never had a problem. Like I said, I'm in my mid-50s now. Can I tell you how agonizing and uncomfortable, not just physically, but mentally? Like I just kept thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? And what I realized was I was dehydrated. I was severely dehydrated. I was not consuming enough water. I was not consuming enough probiotics. I was off. And because I said to myself, why is it all of a sudden that I'm having this problem? Well, duh, I'm getting older. The processing is not great. My GI system's slowing down. I need to help it. And so I really hope that people, even if you're feeling great like I was and everything was great, be mindful of your gut. It's so critical. I'm telling you.
well, our listeners know I was born with chronic constipation my whole life. So I completely understand what you're saying. And it does get worse as you get older. So anything that I think can help people process their intestines is thumbs up. So thank you for addressing that. And
Yeah.
another thing that I love about the book is that each chapter is just filled with information that you really is easy to digest, but so like you want to say, okay, I want to make note of that. I want to highlight that. I want to star that. And one, even in the second chapter, you talk about knowing the hidden dangers that people don't even think about in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, there's all kind of data that says when do certain conditions typically start and when do they peak? And I wanted to provide people with an idea, not to scare people, but I believe that knowledge is power. I wanted to get people to realize if you have your eyes and ears out for dangers that are coming, you can better either avoid or handle the dangers. That's the purpose of that chapter, is to say, listen, just so you understand that during this particular decade, these are the kinds of things that happened. And I want people to read that chapter, for their decade, and then say to themselves, okay, so if these are the kinds of things that I should be mindful of, then what kinds of things can I do to prevent them or stare them off? And what I also try to do in this chapter is, I think that we throw medical terms around a lot, but people don't have a basic understanding of them. Like, what exactly is heart disease? Like, okay, heart disease means something's wrong with the heart, but what? There are different things that can be wrong with the heart. And so what I try to do is I try to give these different conditions and some of the signs and symptoms. Once again, it's one book. I can't give every single sign and symptom, but this is kind of to get you going. So you have a basic understanding so that when you talk to your doctor or when you are online searching for things, you at least have a foundational understanding of what the issues are. But when I think about my people in their 30s, anxiety is a big deal. We didn't talk about mental health for a long time. And now, thank goodness, the lid is off and we can openly discuss it. It's not taboo. But anxiety is a big issue for people in their 30s. It can be very debilitating. And it can be it can be of a crisis level for a lot of people in their 30s. And I think one thing that the pandemic taught us was the need to really take care of our mental health. My grandmother used to say, there's a silver lining to every cloud, and I found a lot of silver linings in the pandemic, by the way. I thought that people better focused and understood the importance now of work-life balance. I'm not a corporate guy, so I don't work for a company. I work for myself. So I've always had a at-home work life, which has been absolutely fantastic. I'm extremely productive. But I was so excited for other Americans to get a chance to be home during a regular work day and work from home, but also have the ability, if you want to, take a 30-minute nap in the middle of the day. And I think that meant a lot. And I think it did a lot for people's mental health. The idea of forcing people back into the office, I have my opinions about that. I don't know if we should return to that, by the way, for mental health reasons. I think that, I think that we need to rethink how we work as Americans, right? I really do. And I think that that's impactful. Anyway, another big thing for people in the 30s is iron deficiency, particularly for women, okay? Iron, of course, is the building block of heme, which is the protein in the red blood cell that carries oxygen. So a lot of women, and men too, by the way, are not getting enough iron. And that causes iron deficiency anemia. And so look out for that in your 30s. When I talk about my 40s, I think people should start looking at things like muscle loss. If you're not active, if you don't use it, you start losing it. And men and women, by the way, who are not physically engaging their bodies, start experiencing muscle loss. Well, some people say, who cares? I mean, it doesn't matter. You're still able to walk. It matters a lot, actually. And when in 60s, I'm really focused on muscle gain. It matters a lot because muscles increase your metabolism, which prevents weight gain. Muscles protect your joints to avoid joint pain. And muscles are important, by the way, for the strength of being able to lift your foot off the curb and not fall and trip, which a lot of people in their 50s and 60s start to do because they have muscle imbalance. So I talk about in your 40s, muscles are extremely important. And of course, for women, perimenopause. I mean, geez, hello. This is a big deal. And my goodness, I'm in the middle of writing actually a menopausal book, but I, as a physician, could not be any happier that finally we can talk about perimenopause and menopause without feeling like we are ostracized or weird or TMI. It's not TMI. It's part of aging. Like women and by the way, women are lucky to live long enough to be able to experience menopause. If you don't experience menopause, typically you had not had a really good outcome, and so it's not fun, but it's one of those transitions in life. And my whole philosophy is I want women to embrace the transition rather than fear the transition. See, the mindset we've given perimenopause and menopause for so long has been one of fear or one of like, strangeness or eccentricity. Not at all. It's the cycle of life. And so perimenopause is a big deal for people to start looking at in their 40s.
Right. And we appreciate you saying that, because that is the truth. It's not a disease. And I always say, if you're lucky to live that long, you're going to go through it. Whether you have symptoms or not, you're going to go through it. And another thing that I really like that you address in there, you were talking about just the importance of physical activity and exercise. And I really like in your book how you put the exercises in there. And like you said, you have the little QR code and you can check. But that, I love it. Can you talk about how that is arranged and just some of the things that are in there?
Yeah. So I'm a big proponent of exercise. And if someone said to me as a physician, I could only write a prescription for one thing for better health, I had to choose one thing. It's exercise. Exercise affects every organ system in the body, from the brain all the way to your toes. And people are not either exercising enough or they aren't exercising correctly. So that's why in each decade, I want to talk about what are the types of exercises you should be doing and why it matters to you. Let's talk about 50s and 60s if I can, please. This is very important to me. The biggest takeaway I want to give women in their 50s and 60s is this. Cardiovascular exercises or aerobic exercises are beautiful. They're good for your heart. They're good for your pulmonary system, your lungs. But you have to lift weights. Resistance training is gold as you get older. And what is at the base of resistance training? Protein. Protein, protein, protein. Now, let's break it down. Muscles, as we get older, atrophy. They shrink. They become weaker. And you can still live, obviously, with weak muscles. But think about the impact on your daily functioning, okay? I was on the plane the other day, and a woman in probably her early mid-50s was trying to get her luggage out of the overhead, okay? She almost killed herself because it was too heavy. She had no control. She couldn't. And so I want women in particular to think about functionality and why they need muscle strength. The other thing I want to say is we have to dispel this myth. It's nonsense that women are going to bulk up and become unattractive because they got all these big, bulky muscles. Listen, there are people who are in the gym 3 hours a day who are training for big muscles and they can't get them. It is a true science and effort to get muscles. So don't worry that by adding strength training to your regimen, you all of a sudden are going to look, no longer feminine or not look attractive. Forget it. That's nonsense. You need muscular strength for daily functioning, for your metabolism, and for your joints. And the way you get it is two ways: protein and lifting weights. There are animal sources of protein. There are non-animal sources. The book goes into that for you. But here's the key. How much protein? How much? You need between 0.75 to 1 gram of protein per desired pound of weight. What does that mean? Let's say you want to weigh 130. That means on a daily basis, you should be consuming about 130 grams of protein. Not enough people are consuming enough protein. They're typically consuming about 40% of the amount of protein that they need. So in the book, I separate the exercises into body parts and into how you perform them: pushing, pulling, complex, which means multiple kind of ways of doing an exercise. And I give you videos so that if you're in your 60s, I don't expect you doing burpees. I mean, you can, but you don't need to do burpees in your 60s, okay? And so that's how the book is broken down. What exercises are good and safest for your decade? How do you do them? And then the nutritional side of the book says, this is what you need to do to fuel your muscles.
And I do really like the way the book is laid out because it's so comprehensive. And you even talk about, like in chapter 6, you talk about the top 7 physical fitness tests, which as soon as I heard physical fitness tests, I thought back to grammar school. And I was like, really? But these really are like, single leg balance. We've had guests on that say when you're brushing your teeth, stand on one leg and then the next day switch to the other. These are so that we age in a healthy way. It's not so much about fitting in a certain outfit size or as we get older, it's to live a healthier, longer life.
Well, my perspective is this. What is going to make you happier as you age? This is just me. Being able to physically do what I want to do, being able to get from the TSA to my gate without being winded, being able to play with my kids and grandkids. Hopefully I have grandkids. These are the things that I want to be able to do with my life. And I do not want to be physically impaired. I don't want to be compromised in that way because that would impact me, not just physically, but mentally, that would really do something to me. And so the question is, when you look at where you are, you have to have an assessment of where you are. And that chapter 6 is so much fun. The purpose of chapter 6 and the fitness test is not to be demeaning to you or to make you feel bad about where you are. It's to say, let's take stock of where you are and what it means, and then let's go from there to get you where you need to be. So that single leg balance is one of my favorite, by the way, because I'll tell you why. When I do that test with people, they say, oh, I got this. This is nothing. I'm talking about people in their 20s all the way to their 60s. Of course I can do this test. And almost universally, they do not do well when they have to do the closed eye part of the test. They're like, what? Wait. They're like, let me do it again. What? These are the things, right? And I love this test. But these are the things that people need to do to see where they are. Whoever told you that brushing your teeth on one leg, that's genius, because it's balance training. And as we get older, we don't do enough stretching. We don't do enough balance training. What I say is, here's the thing for you guys. If you have shoes with laces, see whether or not you can stand on one leg, lift up the shoe that you want to tie, and tie that shoe. If you can do that, you're in good stead. If you can't do it, you got to work on your balance training.
Right. I like too that you add in there what makes you feel like you said, I'm not trying to make somebody feel badly about where they are right now, because you put examples in there of people. I believe, is it after every chapter, you're always like, here's an example of someone that this happened and this is what they did to improve it. So that helps a lot there too. And I do love too how my favorite was the push-up one, because as I've gotten older, I used to do the push-ups, the full body out push-ups. But you're like, but for this test, women, be on your knees. And I'm like, oh, thank you.
Well, you say thank you. Some people said, hey, we can do full push-ups. It's not saying, I wasn't saying that women can't do full push-ups, but the way the test, I didn't create the test. The way the test was designed, in order for the data to compute, it's a modified push-up. That's just how they designed the test. But women, of course, can do full push-ups. But some women get a little upset thinking that I'm implying that they can't do it. Of course, no, not that at all.
Yeah, it was just the reps. Because like, oh yeah, those reps, that's okay. Yeah.
But it does give you kind of a baseline of something to work towards, so that you know if you're deficient in any of how many you can do. It gives you a goal, which is great. It motivates you. Also, you talk about top medical tests and what numbers, which I thought was really important for people, because I don't think most people know what their, blood glucose should be, their kidney function should be, all that stuff. Why was that important to add to the book?
I feel like there are good things and bad things about the internet and social media, obviously. I feel like there's so much misinformation out there. And it's so difficult for people who don't have experience to know whether or not the source of the information is credible, or if the information is credible. And I wanted to provide a one-stop shopping to say to people, here are basic numbers you need to know. Here are the latest reference ranges from reliable sources. So I want to do the work for you, basically. So I want you to come to Eat Your Age. I want you to read that chapter and say, okay, now I have an idea if my cholesterol is too high, if my blood pressure is too high. These are the numbers and these are the ranges. Now, listen, medical tests and numbers, like anything in science, change all the time. So, the Diabetes Association next year may say we want to move the range of what a normal hemoglobin A1C is. Okay, fine. But at least you have a starting place, so that you have, because I believe that one of the major issues in this country when it comes to disease and lifespan is that lay people don't possess a basic knowledge of health topics, and they rely on others to do that. Well, yes, listen, I have a basic knowledge of accounting and economics. I'm not a Wall Street whiz, right? You don't want me investing your money, but at least I can understand when someone is saying that the stock is going up, the stock is going down, da, da, da. People need better health literacy so that they can understand what a doctor is saying, what a report is saying. Otherwise, if you don't have that health literacy, then it's just like, you're like, a deer in the headlight. You don't know, okay, whatever, okay, I guess. And so that's why I wanted to write that chapter, to give people a basic foundation for themselves and their family members. So when the doctor says, by the way, you're pre-diabetic, okay, this is your hemoglobin A1C, they could take the book and say, okay, wait, let me look at this hemoglobin. So I did it. I thought that it was important for people to have a good reference.
I think it is important, especially now when you have my charts and you get these blood tests back and you're like, what is that? And so now,
So true.
and now you have your book right there. And that's better too than even Googling, because when you Google, who knows what you're going to get when you Google. So
it could be a frightening, Dr.
Yes.
Google can be a very frightening
Right.
place.
yes.
We had Dan Buettner on to talk about blue zones, and you referenced those in the book too. And one of the things that he talked about is the need for community. And so I thought it was great. And if you could talk a little bit about your Facebook group, because that offers that level of community where people can ask questions and feel vulnerable and have someone and support. So can you talk about your Facebook group?
I'm very emotional and committed about my Facebook groups, and let me explain to you why. I have spent my entire career trying to empower everybody, rich, poor, black, white, men, women, every race, gender orientation, I could care less. Politics, I could care less. My responsibility as a physician and someone who's been blessed to be able to understand all this complicated information, I took on the responsibility of helping other people, whether I agree with them or not, because we all have just one life. And what I've learned over the years is that people are able to effectuate change better and sustain change when they have community and support, period. Particularly when you talk about health topics, which are hard, like losing weight is hard, making changes in how you eat and exercise, that's hard stuff. And what I learned years ago was that when I set up these Facebook groups, people were like-minded. They had goals. We want to be healthy. We want to fight diabetes. We want to fight hypertension, whatever it is. And the beauty of these groups is that it is a kaleidoscope of humanity. It is people of foreign countries, US, races, ages, everything. And you go into these my groups, and there are people who are bonding and connecting. And they, in regular life, their paths probably would never cross, okay? And the biggest rule of our group is that we are in this together, that this is not a group for politics. This is not a group for religion, nothing. This is a group of people who say, I want to eat better, move better, live longer, and be happier. That's it. And so that's the thread that binds all of us in the group. And I'm sort of like the conductor, like I kind of guide and I'm in it, but it's really the people who make long-lasting friendships in the group. I'm serious. And the beauty of the internet is you can befriend someone who lives in London and you guys can have a relationship and a support system. And so, yes, the name of the group is called Eat Your Age. I'm in there. I have admins who've been with me for almost 20 years. So they're in there answering questions. I answer questions, and I do a weekly Zoom like tonight, where I'm going to be answering questions, encouraging and supporting. But the data shows that people who are able to have the most sustainable changes have a support system. And that's what I try to provide.
That is so great. That's wonderful. Yeah.
It's so important.
It is. It's amazing too when you do something like that. If somebody might find somebody that lives near them, or go to a city where somebody they met in your group was, and say, hey, I'm going to be there. Do you want to meet up? Or it's amazing what that can do.
Connection and community. It's so important. And this book is just wonderful. Thank you so much for writing it. It's really helpful and informative, and it's written well and digestible. So we'll have the links in the show notes for the book. And thank you, Dr. Smith, for joining us today. We appreciate it.
I love talking to you guys. I'm also, for those who are listening or watching, on my Instagram, I give a lot of little health tips and hacks. So my Instagram is at Dr. Ian Smith, spell the doctor out, IAN Smith. And I love what you guys are doing. I believe we are all soldiers in the fight for a better life, and no one's more important than the other. And we all have an ability and platform to help in different ways, and it's to lift collectively everyone. So thank you guys for what you do also.
Well, thank you. And please come back when you finish your menopause book. We would love to talk about
that.